phase two. Looking at my notes, squinting because I don't have my glasses on. Um, what is the successful pitch? What is the successful pitch? We're now moving from I have slides on a screen to I'm now I'm Richard and I'm in front of Mac Milner and I want to gain Mac Milner support because you've got money to invest. Um, I'm looking at a couple different concepts. What's going on in the industry right now? What are you seeing? Is money tight? Is money free flowing? It, what's the availability to access that money? What are you seeing in the marketplace, and how are you finding these investment groups?
Um, so the first part of that is money tight, is money free flowing. Money is very free flowing, more so, than ever than in history, and not necessarily from the traditional sources, on the commercial side. So on the private equity side, there's a lot more leeway for just so many industries that in the past maybe would have never seen the light of day. Some of them, of course, a lot of technology driven, but that technology is crossing every sector. So there's the fundamentals, of course, still are foundational, to some driving of that. Markets, of course, market fit is something huge there, but there is more capital than ever before. So accessing that capital, that's potentially the tricky part. As a networker, as an entrepreneur, as whomever is involved in that process of building those relationships and making those connections, that's where the digging comes in. I mean, there's definitely doing internet searches and figuring out where do I find a place to fund what I'm after, what sectors are going to be interesting, and where is their crossover. So just because something isn't directly related to you doesn't mean that indirectly you will not be able to tap into sources. It's very likely you can build interest in what you're doing if you can show synergy somewhere. Now, with that being said, if you can create the synergy, great. That's the first step. But the other step, of course, is captivating your audience and making sure that it is something that is attractive. And let's just face it, I mean, in getting in the business where profit margins are robust is pretty key. You can love what you do, and obviously that's something. It has to make financial sense, though, right? I mean, if you're talking to these people and they're coming from an investment mindset, they're obviously looking for as much return as possible. If they have a love affair with whatever you're doing, maybe they're willing to take a little less. That's great, but it's still going to obviously make sense for the investor, and you showing them you care about their capital, you care about them, you're going to be a good steward of their money, you're going to be extremely accountable. Okay. And then now winding into the words of the deck, the words of the deck. The slide on the deck is great, but that's not the talking point. It's just a simple place of almost like, here's the one thing: don't let the slide become a distraction, because it's not about the slide. It's about the explanation of what the slide represents, and then those founders or whoever's speaking about that point of the deck making darn well sure that message is getting communicated, and then those magical couple layers deeper just of the conversation, and probing your probing your targets and making sure that you're communicating clearly what you want to by asking questions, not taking it that they're not understanding, but making dang well sure that they do understand what you're communicating by just asking the simple questions. So not meaning to make them sound not intelligent, but something to the effect of, do you understand? So whatever words one needs to put that in to slow it down, make sure it's making sense to them.
Is that you do research on these investment groups, what they've been involved in, and you've had callbacks and due diligence with almost 5 different companies, and 4 of them remain, and the 4 that remain are really they're geared towards what you're working on, because every investment group has their specialty, so to speak. And you're able to talk to them and say, you worked with such and such and you lost 20 million. But you lost it because of such and such dynamic. Here's how that doesn't apply to us. And so you're setting yourself up as the racehorse that wins. Could you kind of touch on that a little bit of how you set up that dynamic and they feel glad that you're aware of it and that you're able to address it?
Yeah. So a lot of these groups have deep pools of networking connections. So if they don't know exactly what you do, but they're interested by the whole project, they're gonna find someone in the field. And it might not be exactly, but they're gonna find someone who knows of what you do. So more than a couple times we experienced that. And literally to where they would set up a call with their expert to lay out some of the groundwork so the expert could hear what's your IP based on. If there's patents, of course, it's a lot more of an open conversation. It just so happens to be with our IP, we can talk a lot about it because it's rather on the complicated side. So there's a multi-step process to the IP. So there's not one thing's different, everything's different, and so on. So there's a lot to talk about there. So they go and find this expert, and we talk shop, and we explain the details of what's going on, and why this is a fresh look, a different look, why it's different, why it's buildable, a lot of things that are going to matter, why it's long term, why it's not short term, why there can be a sale if need be, why there can be an exit if that's what is everyone is desiring most. There's a strategy for an exit as well. So a well-rounded conversation. Hopefully that gets you to the next call with the group, where you can explain yourself to maybe information you held back. You don't want to make a fool out of anybody, of course. Never calling somebody out who was their expert. It just so happened in the situation that you're referencing, we had industry information, inside information of these people that had worked on these projects, and unfortunately these projects, they were trying to figure things out. They were chasing something, and they weren't chasing it with their own money. And what happens is they went many layers deep, still chasing something that they were trying to solve, that they foundationally were guessing and didn't have a really good solution, but they kept attempting deep level dives, which are very expensive in this industry. And unfortunately, wasted a lot of money.
Yeah.
So when we were able to circle back, and we of course were very forthright and didn't want to, would never call anybody out. I mean, ultimately not being kind to anyone, of course, on these types of relationships it's never going to pan out well. Right. So we just don't venture in those waters. Don't make that mistake. So circling back and getting with the principals of the group and saying, just being very candid here. we would have never done that, and here's the reasons we will never do that. We're not going to go swinging for grand slams when we're not even hitting singles consistently yet. So that deep dive in the information they were seeking, which was very costly, you have to have something of those solutions already in place. Now maybe that's not at scale, but you certainly better have some good broad solutions. And then if they don't scale, okay, you can stop things in progress, but not keep spending, especially if it's not your money to spend. Okay. Now luckily our situation, we've spent our own capital to come up with solutions to scale. That's a beautiful thing. But let it be clear, some groups are okay with that exploration as long as you're upfront with them about, we need to solve a couple problems. This is going to take a certain amount of capital. Let's put a stopgap in. Let's see how far we get with that capital, and we'll reconvene if we're coming close to running through that capital. We'll reconvene and all talk about how far we got if we didn't solve it all the way.
That's great. That's great. And your inside information was just, it wasn't inside information. It
Right.
was, the players in the game, and and you guys talk to each other. You know the headaches and experiences you have. And so I appreciate you sharing that. We're going to kind of transition into the third phase of this now. And